Welcome everybody. What you're about to see is a standard hardcore Nuzlocke with one twist. Every Pokemon I catch must be in a unique Pokeball. The only exception I'll make is for gift Pokemon, so I have more room for error. Oh, and to add some extra spice, I'm tired of being able to look up enemy teams, so I'm only going to let myself do that once this run. Without further ado, let's kick things off. We begin our journey by ordering some food. However, our delivery guy must have mixed up the order because instead my friends and I find a bunch of Pokemon in the box they dropped off. Whatever, I'll just let this single mistake become a life-altering event by picking Chorizo as my starter and embarking on a quest to become a Pokemon champion. Surely they won't screw up my order then! On the first route, I opt to skip our encounter and save our default Pokeball for later. Upon exiting the jungle, we get dragged to a cult rally. Inspired by the strange man's words, I abandoned my career path once again, this time to start my own cult, the followers of Chorizo. Long live him in all his pork glory! Shortly thereafter, we even recruit our first follower, when we're gifted a Pansage who I aptly name Ape Postal. Speaking of gifts, another stranger gives us some Dark Balls. I mean, phrasing. Moving on. Anyways, this gives us access to a new encounter. To make it easier for you to see how many of which I have available, I added a little tracker to the bottom left. Back to the actual run though. Thanks to the recently acquired Ape Postal, the first gem ends up being a breeze, and by that I mean we get by on the skin of our teeth thanks to Chorizo flinching multiple times upon being bit by the gym leader's damn dog. In turn, forcing Ape Postal to come out early and take on the gym essentially single-handed. But hey, it worked out, so that's all that matters. To cool down, I take out my frustration on some local Knights of the Round Table, and in return, get rewarded several heal balls, which, as fantastic as they are, can't heal the hole in my heart after Ape Postal gets destroyed by a rock blast from a random trainer. The universe must have felt bad for our team, I guess, as we stumble across some great net balls soon after. Although none of my first encounters have really piqued my interest, so like an engineering student, these balls are just collecting dust for now. This is a little bit of an issue as it leaves Chorizo on his own to carry the load. Somehow he even manages to outmuscle Len's team despite the latter having two significant type advantages on him. The following battle versus Lenora isn't nearly as easy, however, as her infamous Watchog has Retaliate, a move that doubles in power to a whopping total of 140 if it follows the death of a teammate, which is an inevitability given how it's on her last Pokemon. Oh, and to make matters worse, I remember the damn rodent has Hypnosis, as that had given me trouble in the past. So to prepare for this, I give Chorizo a Chesto Berry and go in guns a-blazing, fully expecting to lose. We beat Lenora's lead with relative ease, setting up Watchog for its signature move. Somehow though, the AI saves our hide, as she decides to go for a Hypnosis instead. Luckily, this is the one thing we prepared for, as our Chesto pops off, giving us a window for victory. Throw in some extra spicy RNG luck, and a critical hit lands us our second badge. Quite frankly, we should not have made it this far, but hey, I'll roll with it. We leave the premise only to find that the Knights of the Round Table are up to no good again. Blah blah blah, I don't care. Luke wants a new encounter, so we go to Pinwheel Forest and run into a Sawaddle. This was fantastic as it gave us a grass type to counter Charon's starter, but also bad because it was so weak that we could not risk touching it without killing it. I figured the net ball with its bug type boost and Sawaddle's low level should make it an easy enough catch. So we go for it, and after a brief moment of tension, it's a success. Finally, we have a new follower. Only up from here, fellas. We're going straight to the top, baby. No more debts, just smooth sailing in. He's already dead. Anyways, we get through the rest of the stupid forest with just Chorizo, finding a miracle seed that we can't use on the way out. Speaking of miracles though, we make our way to the desert and catch a Scraggy with our default Pokeball. I dub thee Bob Saget for her saggy pants, and head over to the next gym. Chorizo's fire typing makes quick work of it, but he goes over the level cap in the process. Since it happened during the gym though, I'll I'll let it slide. After that, we stumble into Charon, who challenges us to a fight. This was especially bad considering he had a Pidove and a Duat, two Pokemon we didn't have counters for. Luckily, I was kinda able to see this coming, as a new Charon picked Oshawott, and usually Game Freak makes the rival lead with the Rat 1 bird. Taking advantage of Sagat's bulk and acts as the payback, I'm able to narrowly escape what could have easily been a wipe. Cleaning our hands of our rival, we trek further into the desert to the resort area, where we snag a Maractus with our heal ball, naming it Spike Bree. However, it probably doesn't matter since every grass type we get dies. Oh, but at least we were able to get the non-grass type Yamask from the nearby Relic Castle. But wait, there's more! As Professor Juniper intercepts our journey to give us some Ultra Balls. Before I see any reason to use them though, I run into that weird kid from the cult rally a couple towns ago. He buys me a free ride on the Ferris wheel before saying, "Hey, my name's N, and I'm going to end your team." Next thing you know, we're fighting and he pulls out a Sigilyph that I have absolutely no counters for. True to his word, this doofus ends up being our demise. I'm not giving up though. On run 2, we make it back to where we left off, catching a Tepig, a Pansage, a Roggenrola, a Timber, and a Sandile along the way. Oh, and this time, I'm actually able to take advantage of the free Leaf Stone in Castelia City, since Pansage is, alive this time around. Using this item on him and having Rockhampton makes the Charon fight way easier. Anyways, we make it back to N, and that sadly isn't easier. The battle starts alright with Tim Burton one-shotting the opposing lead. In doing so, this gave me a false sense of security, as I proceed to stupidly keep Tim in versus N's dreaded Sigilyph, thinking he was strong enough to eat a hit and get a rock throw off. And boy was I barely right, as Timmy gets confused by a side beam and drops the rock on his foot, bringing him down to a healthy 3 HP. From there, I pivot to dial Gribble, expecting another psychic move. But instead, N goes for an air cutter that luckily misses. This ends up buying Dial just enough HP to get a single bite off before having to swap out herself. In comes Rockhampton, who finishes the job by the skin of his teeth. Afterwards, N follows up with a Scraggy whose bulk and access to the move Swagger make it tough to kill. However, Applebee's manages to do what Tim Burton couldn't, and tough through the confusion to get the knockout. This left the final Pokemon, a Darumaka, to the hands of our very own fire type, Hogrid, who outmuscles the weird gerbil dude for a well-earned dub. Once the battle was over, N makes prolonged eye contact with me before saying something like, "I have a dream, to become king of the pirates." I follow up with, "I think you got the wrong series, bud," only for him to immediately run off crying. Ignoring that, this close call reminds me that I forgot to get an encounter at Relic Castle. So I trek back to snag the cover fossil and get a Yamask named Coffee via a Great Ball. However, I lose our only Dusk Ball at the time in the process. So we're down to just 2 methods of catching Pokemon for now. We then make our way to Elisa, who I was a bit concerned about since I remembered she had an Emolga whose partial flying type prevented our frail dial Gribble from being a trump card. She leads off with, "Who would have guessed?" a Zap Squirrel while I send out Rockhampton. I go for a Rock Blast, hoping to remove the pest ASAP, only for Elisa to Volt Switch into another Emolga?
Are you sure about that?
Thanks to this boneheaded move, I essentially get a free kill, but not without taking significant damage myself. The additional bright side was that this move reminded me that the gym's gimmick was spamming Volt Switch. So when an Emolga comes out thereafter, I assume another one of those is coming, and pivot to Coffee. Yeah, I could have gotten a Dial Gribble here, but she didn't have much to hit back versus Emolga, and I wanted to save as much of her health as possible in case I needed to swap the Dial later in a situation where I wasn't confident she would take an electric move. Lo and behold, we get hit with another Volt Switch, this time going to her last Pokemon, a Zebstrika. Given the theme of the gym, I assume an electric move is likely coming, so I finally swap the Dial Gribble since she can actually hit this opponent. Bada bing, we get the free swap and I go for a dig. Admittedly, there was a chance the CPU would just swap to Emolga while I was underground and nullify this turn, but I'd rather mess with the squirrel than this fully evolved beast, so I risked it anyways. Elisa decides to keep Zebstrika in for some reason, and seals its fate in doing so. With Dial's Moxie now activated and most of our party weak to flying moves, I decided to stay in and try for a hit. Gribble barely lives and gets a good shot on the final Emolga. From there, I go back to Rockhampton, which easily eats an Aerial Ace. At this point, we were definitely getting outsped and a Volt Switch would likely kill. But since there was no one else I could confidently swap to, I keep Rockhampton in and go for a smackdown. And what do you know? He holds on with 2 HP to seal the victory, giving us our 4th badge. We head over to Driftfile and visit the local Pokemart where I buy back our access to Dusk Balls while snagging some Nest Balls to boot. Afterwards, I even run into a lady who gives us some repeat balls. I immediately spend the ladder on a herdier from the cold storage area, who I dub Tuesday. After, we head over to Clay. Normally, people worry about him because of his Excadrill, but the combo of Leech Seed from Applebee's and a Will-O-Wisp from Coffee allows our Ghost ally to stall out the mole. Outside of Clay's ace, the rest of the team gets easily swept by Grass Monkey before we move on. Clay returns the favor by clearing the webs blocking a nearby cave, where we use our Nest Ball to catch the culprit behind the webs, a Joltik by the name of Taquitos. And we snag a Timer Ball later on in the cavern. Upon exiting, I sadly spill my coffee as Yamask dies to a random trainer. How? Well, you see, I had her out versus a seemingly weak Solosis. However, despite defeating it, I forgot the floating fetus put up a future sight, and Coffee pays the price for my negligence. It's always the random trainers, man. This might be a little shallow of me, but I kid you not. We get a new Ghost type like 5 minutes later when I stall versus a Litwick to get the recently acquired Timer Ball to work on it. I proceed to box Chandler Bing, and we head over to the Flying Gym, where Rockhampton sweeps Skyla with ease. Not gonna lie, I was expecting this one to be harder given how we didn't have a definitive counter to her Water Flying Swanna. However, I managed to get to it with full health, giving Rockhampton a chance to get off a hit safely thanks to its ability Sturdy protecting the ladder from getting one-shot. In doing so, I was able to thankfully knock out the Swan. Charon just has to ruin our fun though, as we only make a couple steps of progress before he challenges us again. I start off the fight really badly as Charon's lead, and on Pheasant, sabotages my attempts to put up Stealth Rocks by repeatedly taunting. On top of which, the damn bird gets both Rockhampton and Tuesday into the red before I finally put it down. Because of this, things look really bad when I get to Charon's last Pokemon, a Semiseer, and my only remaining Pokemon who could tank its hits was Hogrid, who could barely damage it in return. By the time I managed to get it down to low health, Hogrid is set to get outsped and killed on the next turn. So, I swapped the Dial Gribble, whose frailness nearly gets her killed. This put me in a tough position, as the status of my party meant someone had to die here. Knowing there was spare fire and fighting types in the box, I make the difficult decision and throw out Hogrid, my beloved starter, to his demise. His sacrifice isn't in vain though, as it saves the team. But at what cost? The man who started it all was gone, lost to the wind in one swift motion. Blah blah blah. Oh look, the next town! Once there, we stumble by the ice gym where I get an idea. I knew we were gonna have to face Getis' signature Hydreigon eventually, so why not try to get an ice type to counter it? So, with the help of Cerebi, I figured out a trick to Twist Mountain, aka the place we just left. The trick? If we wait till winter, the highest level Pokemon we can encounter there becomes a tie between Cubchoo and Cryogonal. If I were to go in there with a Repel on and lead my party with a Pokemon of identical level to these encounters, I can guarantee I run into one of the two. Having never used the latter, I really wanted one. So, the team and I bunker down till the season changes and try our luck. God damn it, it's a Cubchoo. I hate this Pokemon. I didn't Cubchoose you. Screw this game, it's stupid. I hate Pokemon. I don't want this sniffling little To take out my anger from the incident, we head back to the gym, where I meet its leader and break the ice. However, the only thing that ends up being broken is my spirit, as we lose Taquitos, ironically, to a polar bear. Why was Taquitos out in the first place when I had fire, fighting, and rock types available? Good question. Really good question. You see, Right before this, Bryson led off with a Vanillish who had strongly boosted its physical defense via several acid armors. With just 2 special attackers on the squad and me wanting to save the frail Caitlyn for only when she was absolutely needed, I decided to go to Taquitos, who takes care of the ice cream no problem. From there I kept him out, wanting to do as much damage as possible before pivoting again, and well, you know what happens from there. After Spider-Man passes, we salvage the gym with the efforts of Brockhampton and Tuesday. However, this was a grim reminder that I am getting too sloppy. I didn't even go in here with much of a plan. How was I supposed to finish this game if I kept misplaying these boss fights? I tried to take my mind off things by going to Dragon Spiral Tower, only to realize we need the HM strength. Which, guess who forgot to grab back in Nimbasa City? This guy. Oh baby, I hate myself sometimes. So yeah, with no other choice, we head back to the aforementioned city, and since I'm already way back towards the start of the game, I do what I should have done before the gym and finally revive our fossil, Tortilla the Tortuga. Now, why didn't I revive this defensive tank before the gym, you might ask? Well, simply put, I didn't have a Pokemon to fly me back, and being lazy, I didn't want to trek the journey by foot. Before heading back, I also make use of our recently acquired surfing abilities to catch a Frillish named PB and Jelly. We finally get back to Dragon Spiral Tower when I realize we didn't even need strength to proceed. How great! Oh, and on a lesser note, once we reach the top, we find the dweebs of the round table summoning the covered legendary. That's cool. Totally cool. Definitely won't bite us in the ass later. Yeah, no. Totally fine. You know what isn't fine though? Finding out I have to run all the way back to Relic Castle because I still don't have a Pokemon who can fly. I wipe out a bunch of grunts, only for a single cutscene and to see Alder fly away to the next location, several towns away. Guess who's walking again? At least the company reimburses me for my gas mileage this time though, by giving me the Pokeball to the other covered legendary or whatever. Once I run another marathon to get back to Ice Town, a truly miraculous event happens. I run into a shiny Shelmet. Seeing this as a sign from the heavens, I use one of our last 2 Pokeballs on it, giving her the name Millennia in honor of the boss whose strength I hope it will emulate. Catching our little helmet friend reminds me to finally evolve our trade evolution Pokemon, so I finally take care of that, and as someone who's never seen shiny a Kelgore till now, I gotta say I love the design. Afterwards, we head over to the next town, barely surviving a surprise encounter with Bianca where Tim Burton pulls off a clutch save versus her Scald spamming Simipour. Wounded, we tiptoe the ensuing route of trainers and make it to the next town, only to wind up at a Getsis rally where he tries to get us to subscribe to some metric fruit fella or whatever. Once healed, I go back to the department store we passed and buy a quick ball, giving us one more encounter. We head over to the next route where we use it on a Vullaby named Volturo. While in the area, I test the memory of mine and explore the route for a Dusk Stone to find my hunch correct and that some guy hiding behind the trees does indeed give you said stone, with which we evolve Chandler Bing. Following that, we finally use the convenience of Fly to go back and acquire the free Eviolite and talk to the move reminder to revamp our Pokemon's movesets. With this much needed buff, we head back to Opelucid City where we take on the next gym. Mind you, this was the part of the run I was most worried about since I used my singular trainer lookup on Getsis and we didn't have any strong ice types at this point. Throwing out, I was pretty sure I remember Drayden using D-Dance as part of his tactics, and we could easily wipe here. So much of the aforementioned planning was just me making a backup strategy on backup strategy on backup strategy, etc. Guess it doesn't matter much though when you lose one of your beloved early game teammates to a random gym trainer though. Ignoring this bad omen and trying to look past the team falling apart, I go in with a less than ideal group. We lead off with the recently added Millennia, whose broken speed stat and access to Yawn from her pre-evolution allows us to put Drayden's Pokemon to sleep, while I pivot to Tim Burton, who you may notice is paralyzed. Well, you see, all this time he's had the ability Guts, and thanks to me recently acquiring the TM Facade and some local fungus, I decided to finally try out the classic strat. To make sure it goes even better, I risk a bulk up. It pays off as Fracture stays asleep for both that turn and the next as I finally attack. Repeating the same move, Tim Burton brings the Tim Hurtin and takes out the ensuing Drudagon. And just like that, we are well on our way to another badge when Drayden's ace, Haxorus, dodges our next facade to get off a Dragon Tail, swapping us out. Things aren't too bad though, as we land on Chandler Bing, who can nerf Haxorus' attack with a Will-O-Wisp, on top of which we take advantage of the Lizard's low special defense by using our now double power Hex. Despite Drayden's best efforts to heal, a lucky miss from his Dragon Tail allows us to best the dragon and come out on top without a single mortality. We leave the gym only for the professor to ask us if we regret going on this journey. I say yes, and she must have felt bad because she gives us a Master Ball in return. You know who doesn't feel bad for our team though? Jaren, who challenges us for the upteenth time! Thankfully, he isn't much of a threat at this point though, since the team finally has some diversity. The real threat lies at the next leg of the journey, the Pokemon League, or more specifically, Victory Road, as a random trainer takes the life of our second oldest Pokemon on the team, Applebee's, via a dynamic punch. Mind you, not only does this move have 50% accuracy, no, it was an optional trainer too. Isn't that great? Isn't that just fantastic? Isn't that just plus ultra? Oh, speaking of ultra, once we clear Victory Road, I finally go spend our Ultra Ball on a safe, guaranteed counter that I felt like gave us some additional reinforcements for the impending Zekrom, a Stunfisk. Yep, you heard that right. This floppy little piece of sliced bread was about to play a key role. After a little bit of additional preparation, we head into the league. Our first opponent is the member of the E4 I'm most worried about, Marshall, whose fighting type specialty brings me the most concern as I only have some defensive coverage versus it in my two ghost types. And I'm not even too confident in them as I know a lot of fighting type Pokemon after Gen 4 start to carry rock type moves, giving them a counter to Chandler. In addition, my only other ghost type is weak to physical moves, which is exactly what fighting types tend to be good at, so that's great. However, I use these two bits of info to my advantage. First, I lead off with Chandler, who I think could dodge a potential rock type move since I gave it the item Bright Powder, which lowers the chance of enemy moves hitting. Normally this wouldn't be enough to make me confident, but rock type moves tend to be lower accuracy. So I felt the combo of that, the powder, and the rock moves not being stabbed would make it safe to start my plan with her. This being to get off a Confuse Ray right off the bat. From there, if I dodge the attack, which I do, I can spam Shadow Ball until I'm hit. Thankfully, RNG seems to be back on our side as Marshall's lead kept hitting itself until it dies. Following the red Muppet is its blue counterpart, Sock. Chandler Bing once again gets off a Confuse Ray, but this time gets hit with a Stone Edge, barely hanging on to life. From there, we shift to plan B and go to Tim Burton, who's able to get off 3 bulk ups with minimal health loss thanks to Sock being confused, and Tim's already good physical defense. I hate to say it, Marshall, but it socks the sock, as this turn of events allows me to brick break our way to victory with our now overpowered friend. For the next E4 member, Caitlyn the Psychic, I start off with Millennia. Like last time, I try to incapacitate the opposing lead right off the bat, opting for a yawn. From there, I protect to assure the foe goes to sleep, and then I swap to Tuesday, who gets in 2 workups before chewing through the whole team with his super effective crunch. Note, it probably was a little risky to keep him out there for the entire battle, but between Tuesday's decent bulk and his boosted attack stat, I decided to risk it for the biscuit. Up next is the Dark type user and wannabe Disney villain, Grimsley. I lead with Millennia once again, hoping to pull off the same strat. However, I was worried Scrafty would carry Stone Edge, so I switched to Tim Burton. I get off a bulk up while he throws sand in my eye. Twice. Luckily, we still land a Brick Break and one-shot him. A Liepard follows, and I swap to Volturo in an effort to clean Tim's eyes. I quickly find out that Eviolite Volturo can outmuscle the cat, so I proceed to do just that. From there, Dimsley or whatever sends out his own crocodile, and I go back out to Tim Burton. Knowing firsthand the power of this crocodile, I waste no time and spam Brick Break till it's gone. However, Tim gets the pretty low health in the process. because of which I swap him out for Tuesday upon seeing the final foe of the fight, a Bisharp. This was mainly a scouting move though, as I wanted to confirm Dimsley would use a dark type move before going to my main counter plan, Millennia. However, upon doing so, I find out the Bisharp knew Aerial Ace, making me afraid to send in my Glass Cannon. With special effective coverage against half my team, and the other half being at dangerously low health, I had a decision to make. Although I didn't like it, I sent out and sacrificed Volturo for the sake of the party. Her fall isn't in vain though, as it gives Millennia an opening for her signature Yawn Protect combo, allowing me to have a relatively safe switch to Tim and end the fight with a quad effective Brick Break. This just left the final member of the E4, Chantal, the Ghost type specialist. Given how Volturo was one of my key counters to her, and how Ghost types bodied the majority of the remaining team, I was a bit concerned to say the least. Things started off decent though, as I lead with a Yawn from Millennia, who would have guessed, and take a Will-O-Wisp in return. From there, I get in a Protect to assure Cofagrigus goes to sleep, only to see the latter is rocking Shadow Ball. My original plan from here was to swap to Tuesday and get some workups off, but not wanting to get my dog burned, I opt for Chandler Bing instead. Why? Because I kept the move in prison on her for Getsis, knowing that he would have his own coffin with Shadow Ball, and then in prison would prevent the enemy from using any move that the user had. So as long as Chandler also had Shadow Ball, Getsis couldn't hit back hard. Since Chantal's coffin ended up being in the same boat, it applied here too. After I make sure we're good defensively, I end up one-shotting the Cofagrigus, making my worries unfounded. Following which, a Golurk comes out. Like its predecessor, it gets outsped and one-shot. What was an issue though was the Jellicent that came next, as it was tanky enough to potentially survive a hit from Chandler, and it had access to 2 different types of moves that were super effective. I decide to risk a potential ghost move and swap to my own Jellyfish. Luckily, we get hit with a Surf, and Jelly takes no damage thanks to her Water Absorb ability. Successfully anticipating a ghost move from there, I pivot to Tuesday, whose immunity gives him a clean swap before he chews his way to victory. Lastly comes another familiar face, a Chandler. I stay out and go for another Crunch, only for Tuesday to take a massive hit. All too soon, we find ourselves in a difficult position once again. Another Fire Blast and Tuesday would be dead. The only 2 Pokemon in the party I was confident could eat a Fire Blast were Chandler Bing and Jelly, but neither could take a ghost move on the next turn. With no other options and not wanting to lose another Pokemon, I risk it and swap to Bing. As I predicted, she lives the next hit, albeit to an unexpected Psychic. From there, it all came down to why I ultimately chose Bing. She had to outsped her duplicate to win. Since I'm pretty sure Elite 4 trainers aren't EV trained, I was pretty confident we'd go first. And what do you know? What we do? Just like that, we narrowly escaped death and finish off the Pokemon League. All that was left was the champion, who apparently was just dubbed to be N like 5 seconds before we got the Alders room. Blah blah blah, I get access to a PC one last time, and N tries to have a heart-to-heart with me, I think. Once he's done talking, he tells me to catch Blue Eyes White Dragon, so I use my Get Out of Jail Free card. However, I box it because I don't like using legendaries. Speaking of legendaries, N leads with his knockoff version of mine. I immediately swap to Dial Gribble, knowing it's an electric type, and thankfully I am immune to its signature move as a result. From there, I go for a dig, narrowly dodging a Giga Impact while underground. The move sets me up to 2-shot Zekrom, but I really didn't know if Dial could eat such a powerful move. After some thought, I settled on risking it, as I had backup and sliced bread. Bada bing, Dial Gribble takes it like a champ and manages to knock out the legend. Up next comes everyone's favorite, Ice Cream Cone, who Chandler is able to handle with ease. N's version of Tortilla follows, and I swap to Tim Burton, who eats a heavy hit upon landing. We're only able to get Caracosta in knockout range before Tim gets in the red, however. Predicting an Aqua Jet since we rocked one on our own Caracosta for a bit, I pivot to Jelly, whose Water Absorb comes in clutch as the turtle does indeed go for a jet. We proceed to surf our way to Kling, who Sliced Bread gets a solid hit on before 2 metal sounds sharply reduce his special defense. Hearing what would come next, I keep the Ferris wheel spinning and bring out Chandler Bing, who, thank God I brought out, because the gear train goes for a hyper beam that surely would have killed Bread. All it takes is a flame burst to finish the job before N sends out an Archeops, who we counter with Flopmaster 3000. The latter easily outmuscles it, bringing us to N's last Pokemon, Zoroark. Seeing how bulky Bread was up to this point, I keep her out and risk a Thunderbolt. This does a fair amount of damage and we end up living, but there's no way that works a second time. So I get our final team member involved and pivot to Millennia, who steals the deal with a Bug Buzz. Before going further, I just want to say I am so glad I caught Sliced Bread as a backup for Zekrom, because I don't know how he would have countered Archeops otherwise. Anyways, N gets scolded by his dad for losing to a trainer without a legendary Pokemon and ultimately disowns him on live TV. With that, we finally made it. No, not the whole disowning thing, but rather, we finally made it to the big bad man I've been preparing to fight all game. Getsis, perennial run-ender, an overpowered douchebag had come to face us at last. The cult leader starts off the battle as poorly as he starts off his speeches though, by sending out a Cofagrigus. Originally, I intended on doing the whole imprison thing, but after seeing I could one-shot this Pokemon when I fought Chantal, I just go for a Shadow Ball. Who would have guessed? This does the trick and we're on the Buffaland. Like the dumbass I am, I completely forget that I looked at Getsis' team prior and knew he had Earthquake on his Buffalo. Yet I stay in anyways, go for a measly Confuse Ray, and get one shot myself. Chandler Bing deserved better to die than at the hand of my brain fart. I try to salvage my mistake with Tim Burton, but we both end up a hurtin' as I underestimated just how hard Buffaland hits. Seeing as how we were slower and I wanted to save Tim for later, I swapped the Dial Gribble, predicting Getsis to heal. My hunch ends up being correct and Dial gets a clean landing. Unlike Tim, she's able to outspeed Buffaland and take him out in 2 Brick Breaks, triggering her Moxie. With the attack boost, I opt to stay in and risk a move versus the next opponent, Getsis' signature Hydreigon. The latter goes first and tries a Fire Blast, only to thankfully miss, giving us just enough time to get in a Brick Break. Not feeling confident in any of my pivots, I stay in and try my luck again, only for Dial to perish like she should have a turn before. Millennia and her Usain Bolt speed come in to clean up and successfully do so with a Bug Buzz. With my greatest fear on his team out of the way, I immediately felt a sense of relief. However, I am just barely halfway through the battle and still need to deal with Pokemon like the Bisharp that's now in front of me. Wanting to save Millennia for Getsis' Seismitoad if possible, I swapped to Timmy B, who I only swapped to in confidence knowing that he resists all 3 of Bisharp's attacks. From there, all it takes is one quad effective fighting move to notch another KO. Alas, this was the end for Tim Burton, as I needed a clean swap into Electros to make sure I could kill it with the team I had left. Out comes Sliced Bread to avenge our fallen comrade, and I throw water from Flint, Michigan on him. Use Toxic. Relying on Bread's bulk, I proceed to try and stall out the eel. Right at the very end, I use an Endure to assure we live what I was confident would be the final turn. However, Electros barely holds on to life just like us. Almost certain Getsis would heal, I accept my fate and go for another Toxic. However, the AI must have been tempted to go for the kill because of Sliced Bread being in the red, and goes for a Flamethrower to finish the job. In doing so, assuring its own Shakespearean death as well. All that was left was the aforementioned Seismitoad. Prepared for this, I bring out Millennia, who freakishly absorbs the entirety of the Toad, giving us the penultimate dub and making this run a success.
Getsis, more like come get this L, am I right or am I right, fellas?